my name is Antonio Romano Alcala. I'm working with Friends of the Earth on our agroecology programs here in the US. And I'm going to be facilitating this panel, this plenary session on land grabbing. So I just wanted to frame a little bit of what we're going to be discussing today and explain who our speakers are. So a lot of the things we've been talking about, both on the fighting the fossil fuel industry on one side, as well as creating more regenerative agricultural systems on the other, rely on a fundamental basis, which is land, right? Obviously, we did have a session about oceans, and we should not forget the fact that our planet is full of water as well. But fundamentally, these are issues that pertain to the control of the access to the resources that are based in land. And so land is a sort of precondition to making this transformation or this transition that we're all seeking. And yet, at the same time, we know that land rights and the rights of indigenous people and those small farmers who have been contributing the solutions agriculturally are often denied or taken away. And so we need to think about the ways that, with land as a precondition, how do we address land access fundamentally as a necessary step towards all of the solutions that we're discussing today, because we can't all just go out and access land in order to institute regenerative agricultural systems. And there are people who have been doing these systems for thousands of years or hundreds of years or dozens of years and are being, through various mechanisms, kicked off of their land. So in favor often of extractive enterprises, whether those are agriculturally extractive enterprises like palm oil plantations in the tropical parts of the world, or whether they're extractive enterprises like fracking. And we also know that within our context here in the US, there are people who have been farming land that have the rights to the minerals contained within their land given away, essentially, and subverting their ability to manage the land sustainably. So today, under the banner of land grabbing, we're going to talk about what is a land grab, what's going on with land grabbing around the world, how does that affect us here, what are the connections across borders involving these issues of land grabbing. So first, we're going to hear from Elizabeth Fraser, who works with the Oakland Institute and is going to introduce land grabbing and sort of what the conditions and phenomena we're seeing around land grabbing are. And then we have Mario Luna Romero, who's coming from Mexico, from the Yaqui tribe, who's been defending his tribe's access to land and ability to stay on the land in countering efforts to basically steal their water supply and drive them off of the land. And we were going to have Luis Magana, who works in the Central Valley with farm workers, but he was unable to make it. So instead, Miguel Robles is going to step in and talk about some of these issues about how conditions of work and laborers and the agricultural system here in California are affected by land grabbing going on outside of the states. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth, but I wanted to remind everyone that there is a live stream happening, and that if you are able to share that on social media so other people who weren't able to be here can join in and see what's going on, that would be much appreciated. Apparently there was about 1,000 people yesterday who were watching it via live stream. So thank you, and I hope you have a great day also.
Wonderful. Thank you, Antonio, to the rest of the panelists, and to everyone here for coming out early on a Saturday morning to talk about land grabbing. I really appreciate you all being here for this discussion. So my name is Elizabeth Fraser. I'm a policy analyst with the Oakland Institute. And for those of you that don't know, the Oakland Institute is an independent policy think tank, and our mission is to bring fresh ideas and bold action to the most pressing social, economic, and environmental issues of our time. And over the last 7 years, thank you very much. For the last 7 years, one of the issues that we've really focused on extensively is the issue of land grabbing. I want to start by giving a bit of context for our work with this issue. Starting in about 2009, one of our staff members was working on a report on the causes of the high food price crisis. And in the course of that investigation, noticed this new emerging phenomenon that large swaths of land, primarily in the global south, were being bought up by investors and wealthy countries around the world. There wasn't very much analysis happening on this issue at the time, and so the Oakland Institute embarked on a multi-year study going to 7 different countries across sub-Saharan Africa to really try to better understand what was happening. Who was behind these land grabs? What were they for? How were they happening? But most importantly, who were they affecting on the ground, and what was happening to those local communities? And really, we've been engaged in these issues ever since. Today, we're working in solidarity with communities around the world, across sub-Saharan Africa, in Papua New Guinea, where this picture is from, in Sri Lanka, in Ukraine. These are all communities that are facing countless injustices when it comes to land rights. And in this issue, we feel we have several roles. One is to elevate the voices of those people experiencing land grabbing on the ground. Similarly, to support land rights defenders who are facing arrest, intimidation, legal battles, to support them for courageously defending their land. We're also mobilizing for change here in the US, and then we're trying to really reframe the debate and the discourse to shine light on the reality of what land grabs are and who they're impacting. And that's mostly what I'm going to be talking about today. But before I get to that, I want to talk about what land grabs are. So that we're all on the same page for this conversation going forward. So while we might have slightly different definitions, for the purposes of my talk, land grabs are really the purchase or lease of large parcels of land by wealthy investors and or wealthy countries. And in the case studies that I'm going to be talking about, this is primarily happening in the global south, though I think Miguel is going to talk about land grabs happening here in the US as well. So as I mentioned, there was a really big surge in land grabs in the late 2000s, and I briefly want to talk about what some of those driving factors were. There we go. The first one that I want to mention is food security. So after the high food price crisis of 2007-2008, we saw this trend of net food importing countries that were starting to buy up land in order to ensure a constant supply of food for their populations. At the same time, we saw new markets emerging for non-food crops, which created different kinds of new demand for agricultural land. And what I'm talking about here are things like agrofuels, forestry schemes, carbon credits that emerged because of programs like REDD+, reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, and other such programs. Now, connected to these two issues, surging food prices and new demand for land, came financial speculation. What we saw were investors trying to figure out where to find their next big buck after the financial crisis, and land became a really hot area to start to invest in and speculate in. To give you a sense of the scale, by 2009, 56 million hectares, which is the same size as France, had been acquired through these massive land deals. This surge has been promoted by a lot of really, really powerful actors, groups like the World Bank, so-called development agencies like USAID and DFID, hedge funds. And these big groups often argue that these investments, these large-scale land investments, provide win-win development opportunities. They're a win for the investors, for the home governments, for local populations. And so what I want to do today is I want to debunk a couple of the myths that are being promoted about why these are win-win situations, and tell you about some of the research that we've done on the ground that shows that this just isn't the case. So I've got 4 myths for you. Myth number 1 has to do with food security, and it goes that land being leased is not productively used, and investments will therefore increase agricultural productivity and boost food security. The reality that we see on the ground is that so often these deals are shifting land away from traditional smallholder agriculture to make way for agrofuel and forestry operations, but also sometimes crop production. But that crop production tends to be export-oriented cash crops. These are all practices that generally externalize profits while undermining local food security. And I have 2 very brief examples here. The first is from Uganda, when we investigated a Norwegian company called Green Resources, who had a 50-year lease for about 11,000 hectares of land. And this project was for a forestry operation aimed at climate mitigation. Climate mitigation sounds good, but the effect on the ground was that 8,000 villagers lost access to land that they had relied upon for generations, for grazing cattle, for growing food, for gathering medicinal plants, and for other vital survival and livelihood activities. Now, food security is an issue in Uganda. At the same time, 40,000 tons of food aid were being delivered to Uganda annually. So this land should be used to improve local food security, but this wasn't realized through a project like this. A second example comes from the country Zambia. This was a project led by an investment firm called Chaitin Atlas. They had a 10,000 hectare lease for crop production in this case. And while they were growing crops, part of their legal agreement meant that they could export 80% of their food grown for profit, while at the same time 50% of the local population was unable to meet their minimum nutritional needs. So in both these examples, we see an externalization of profits and an undermining of local food security. Myth number 2 is that land investments are going to create local jobs. These are promises that are often made to convince governments to accept these deals, and so often these promises are broken and jobs are not realized. But even when these jobs are realized, it's not a guarantee that they're going to boost the economic well-being of those people that they employ. And the example I want to offer here comes from Tanzania. A company called Sun Biofuels had a lease for about 8,000 hectares of land, in this case for an agro-fuel development project. They promised 1,500 permanent jobs once the plantation was up and running, and between 2009 and 2011, some jobs were created. About 750 jobs were created. But our field work on the ground showed that the lives of those plantation workers decreased economically as a result of those jobs. There was less agricultural production happening in the region, which meant that people had to buy food at the market for higher prices because of the decrease in agricultural production. Also, as a result of the plantation moving in, access to water and fuel was compromised, which meant people had to spend more money and travel further to get access to those resources. And ultimately, the take-home pay just was not enough to offset the increased cost of living. Now, of course, then in 2011, Sun Biofuels filed for bankruptcy. 600 of those 750 workers were fired. Those that were kept on as security guards to keep people from reclaiming their land. And we had this series of broken promises, no long-term jobs in the long run, but also, when they did happen, decreased economic well-being. So this is a myth. Myth number 3 is that land that is leased is often vacant or empty. This myth overlooks so many things: traditional, non-sedentary livelihoods like pastoralism. It often overlooks customary land rights, alternative uses of land for fuel and medicine, but sometimes it's also just patently false. And I have a really egregious example to illustrate this point, also from Tanzania. In about 2011, there was a company called Agrosol Energy. And Agrosol had a lease for 325,000 hectares of land, a huge amount of land that included 3 villages. These villages were supposedly abandoned refugee camps, and that was true for one of them, but not true for the other 2. This is a brief picture of one of the other 2 villages. Between these 2 villages, they were home to over 160,000 Burundian refugees who had fled violence in Burundi in the 1970s and had lived in these villages for over 40 years. Even more outrageous, the company knew that these villages were not abandoned. Their memorandum of understanding said that the refugees would be resettled or sent home. To make it even worse, the Tanzanian government, it was discovered, had started the naturalization process, offering citizenship to these folks in 2008, and was withholding it and making it contingent on resettlement. So this is a clear example of where land is very obviously not vacant. Our last myth has to do with who's behind these deals. And after the food price crisis, many people thought that China, India, the Gulf states, and others were leading this trend. And it's true that many of these countries have engaged in some of these land grabs, but the largest and the most appalling cases that the Oakland Institute has uncovered have been led by investors and by hedge funds here in the West. I have three very brief examples here. To go back to Agrosol Energy, Agrosol was a joint venture between four groups, and there was one man, Bruce Rastetter from Iowa, who was simultaneously the CEO or managing director of three of these four groups. And the fourth group, which was an American university partner, he was a major donor and on the board of regents for. So clear US connections leading this force. A second example comes from South Sudan. This was one of the largest land deals that the Oakland Institute investigated for up to 1 million hectares of land at the measly price of 40 cents per hectare. And at the heart of this deal was a Texan firm and the former US ambassador of refugee affairs in Sudan. A third example is university pension funds. We discovered that Harvard and Vanderbilt universities both had heavy stakes in equity firms that were land grabbing across sub-Saharan Africa, which led to large divestment campaigns in both of those universities. So it's clear the West is heavily involved in this trend of land grabbing. These are but a few of the myths and but a few of the deals that the Oakland Institute has worked to expose over the years. And as I wrap up, I just want to really stress that resistance on the ground to these land deals is fierce. In the face of intimidation, in the face of theft of resources, violence, arrest, communities around the world are continuing to mobilize to send us information despite the dangers that that incurs on a regular basis and day in, day out to courageously fight for justice. And so I want to share a couple of victories with you before closing. And the first one is to draw an end to the story on Agrosol Energy and to tell you that that project actually never managed to break ground. Yeah, big victory. And the mobilization in this case actually was mostly rooted in the US. Iowa State University was the university partner, and after the Oakland Institute exposed this deal for what it was, there was a massive mobilization of students and community members in and around the university. Ultimately, they forced the university to withdraw. Together brought huge spectacle to the project, and it's just never been able to move forward. A second, yes, thank you. A second example I want to share with you comes from Cameroon. A number of years ago, there was a 99-year lease on the table for 73,000 hectares of land that was going to deforest pristine rainforest in order to set up a large-scale palm oil plantation. And it was going to impact an estimated 45,000 people locally. Local communities, Cameroonian NGOs, and international groups with leadership from the Oakland Institute helped to expose that deal for what it was. And as a result of massive mobilization, this deal was dropped from 99 years down to just 3 years. And the land area was dropped by over 2/3 from 73,000 hectares to less than 20,000 hectares. That is a huge change. Now that deal is up for negotiation. The 3 years are up this fall. And so we're working hard now with communities on the ground and other partners to make sure that in November of this year, that deal is ended once and for all and does not move forward. The final example I want to share is a really timely one, and it comes from Senegal. A number of years ago, some local herders reached out to us when 20,000 hectares of their land was unexpectedly bulldozed by an Italian company. The Oakland Institute and others helped to expose the deals of this project, the terms of the agreement, the actors behind it, and now we're helping communities in their process of reclaiming that land. I believe perhaps even it's today that the community members are starting to put up fences to self-demarcate the land. And their aim is to demonstrate that local communities can use this land more productively than foreign investors can, in ways that truly benefit the local economy, that support alternative livelihoods like herding cattle, and that work in harmony with the environment. It's communities like this that we're working with to support in solidarity with on a regular basis. Communities that are reclaiming power and sovereignty of their land, of their water, of their food, of their seeds, and are showing powerful actors in the West that they do not need top-down Western-led agricultural investments. What they need is food sovereignty. What they need is power and voice and participation in how their land and natural resources are used. So I'm going to leave it there and pass it on to my fellow panelists. Thank you so much all for being here this morning, for coming out, and for everyone that is working so passionately and courageously on the front lines of this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was a fantastic introduction. And now that we have an overview, we can get to a specific battle that is currently raging just south of our border in Mexico. So, Mario, you want to venir para compartir con la gente? So, Mario is going to explain in español, in Spanish, and I'll do my best to translate.
Este otro sí funciona, ¿verdad? Okay, you want to do the traduction from this one?
Buenos días. Reciban ustedes un saludo de mi pueblo, de mi tribu, allá en Sonora. Dios Mchaniabo, de Chemalaya Cayo Machu, yan Lautipo, Guanim Yaura, Nim Nevit, Tuala, Huacateota, que tal que si unimos Wisbaeke, Huacaitom Yolo Turia, y Tom Huella, o que Emoa, Tuturia, Emona Wisbae, un Pamani, de que Emovicha. Y con el permiso de mis mayores que a la distancia están escuchando y están dándole seguimiento a nuestros pasos hasta acá, decirles que allá en Sonora se está replicando prácticamente lo que acaba de comentar la persona que me antecedió. Es importante para nosotros recalcar pues que estas agresiones y este ataque sistemático contra los pueblos y sus formas de organizarse y de concebir su vida para garantizar el futuro y el presente y el pasado de nuestras generaciones es algo con lo que seguramente estas empresas, estas iniciativas de despojo se van a seguir encontrando a lo largo y ancho del país y del mundo. De eso nos vamos a encargar nosotros.
So first, Mario introduced in his own native language that he was asking for permission from his ancestors to share with you what is going on in Sonora in Mexico. And just wanted to point out that there is exactly an application of what Elizabeth was talking about, this process of land grabbing, and that it's important to note that these systemic attacks on local peoples and on their traditional ways of life is compromising their futures, and they will continue to battle against these.
Mi pueblo es uno de los pueblos indígenas de México que más ha sufrido precisamente esta intención de despojo, de despoblarlo y de eliminarlo de la faz de la tierra. Hemos pasado en los últimos años, en la historia reciente, actos genocidas en los que más de 10,000 niños, mujeres y mayores fueron deportados de un extremo a otro del país, desde Sonora hasta Yucatán, para ser vendidos en las haciendas enequeneras, en aquel entonces, como esclavos.
So his community, which is an indigenous community, there's been efforts to essentially remove them from the land to eliminate them. And in recent years, there's been an almost genocidal effort to relocate 10,000 women and children from Sonora all the way to the Yucatan in Mexico to be sold into work, but the conditions of which are essentially slavery.
Esto estamos hablando desde 1910, en la época de Porfirio Díaz como presidente, y estamos hablando también de cómo es que estas políticas de despojo hacia los pueblos no demuestran otra cosa más que la intención de apropiarse totalmente del destino de los seres humanos, el menosprecio que existe por la vida tanto de los seres humanos como de nuestra madre tierra, se ha manifestado desde entonces y se sigue replicando en diferentes formas hasta la actualidad.
So Mario's talking about how there's essentially these policies of displacement that are repeating again and again. I missed the last part.
Principio.
Yeah, so essentially what he's talking about is that these aren't just sort of casual processes, that they're actual active policies of displacement, of genocide against the people.
Hoy día estamos viviendo nuevamente otro atentado contra nuestra existencia misma, ¿verdad? En aquel entonces no pudieron acabar con la fuerza de los hombres y mujeres del pueblo Yaqui que defendieron contra todo el territorio que nuestro Creador nos encomendó cuidar.
So recently there's been another attempt to basically on our existence, an attempt to destroy our existence, but luckily these forces could not because of the strength of our Yaqui people, of our men and women, our children who have been in struggle against it.
Hoy desde el 2010 nos dimos cuenta de que nuestro territorio, nuestra tierra, nuestra agua, nuestro bosque, nuestro conocimiento, todavía está siendo acechado y está siendo agredido. En el 2010 nos enteramos que el gobierno de Sonora, el gobierno estatal, en contubernio con los poderes fácticos que existen ahí, intentaban trasvasar el agua del río Yaqui hacia la cuenca del río Sonora. Ese proyecto denominado Acueducto Independencia, en aquel entonces se llamaba Acueducto del Novillo, pues nos tuvimos que enterar por la prensa. En ningún momento nos dijeron oficialmente de qué se trataba esta obra.
So in 2010, we noticed that our territory, our water, our forests, our traditional knowledge was all being attempted basically to being threatened. This was because the government of the state of Sonora was attempting to redirect the water from the river, the Yaqui River, which is the main river that they use to irrigate and to use water for their people. And they were attempting to redirect this water through what they were called the Independence Aqueduct. And so they recognized that this was a threat against their way of life, and they went to the press and tried to raise attention to the issue.
El argumento principal que ellos manejan es que en la ciudad capital de Sonora hace falta agua, y efectivamente hace falta en todo el norte de México. Sin embargo, no es trasvasando aguas de una cuenca a otra como se solucionan los problemas. Nosotros lo entendemos porque conocemos el ciclo hídrico, conocemos nuestro territorio y sabemos que hay una situación muy delicada entre la existencia real de agua en nuestros territorios.
So the main argument that the government has been using is that the capital of Sonora lacks water, and so that they need the water from this other area. But it isn't a solution to move water in this way from one place to another. The Yaqui people, understand the water cycle, and we understand our territory, and we understand the effects that it has to remove this water from the system.
Ellos argumentan que están desviando esa agua para darle a los habitantes de la ciudad de Hermosillo, lo cual nosotros en realidad sabemos que no es cierto. Esa agua y esa tubería, ese acueducto, casualmente termina donde empieza el parque industrial de la ciudad.
So, okay, so they argue that, this is necessary because we need to help the people of the capital of Sonora, and those people need the water. But we know this is completely untrue because the aqueduct actually ends just shy of the city at the industrial park that's at the edge of the city.
Al momento en que el gobierno anuncia la obra del acueducto, la planta Ford aumenta su capacidad al doble de su. La cervecería Heineken, la más grande, una de las más grandes del mundo, se instala en Hermosillo. Una de las plantas de explotación de minas cementeras, la más grande de Latinoamérica, se instala también, la Holcima Pasco, se instala en Hermosillo. Existe desde hace mucho tiempo la Coca-Cola, la Pepsi, y nosotros nos preguntamos cómo en una ciudad que no tiene capacidad de darle agua a sus habitantes, pues tiene estas fábricas ahí y se están instalando más.
So when the government first announced that it was going to be putting in this aqueduct and redirecting this water, immediately some of the industries, the companies, the large factories that existed around the capital, such as the beer producer Heineken, cement factories, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, many of these other industries that have already been there, immediately started growing. They actually built more factories. There's an additional growth in the industrial sector at the end of the aqueduct. And he's asking, how can this be that there's not enough water for the people of the city, and yet the industrial sector keeps growing and using more and more water?
Lo importante aquí es que dejemos claro que el pueblo yaqui no niega su derecho al agua, a compartir su derecho al agua. Lo importante es decirles que el pueblo yaqui, el 70% de la población no tiene agua potable. Tenemos agua entubada, en donde dotan a nuestras familias de agua sacada del subsuelo, altamente contaminada de arsénico.
So the important thing is that the Yaqui don't give up our rights to this water. 70% of Yaqui people currently don't have access to fresh water. The water that we do have from wells often is contaminated with arsenic.
Entonces, en ese razonamiento, si nosotros somos los primeros usuarios del río Yaqui, en donde según los antropólogos existimos por más de 3,000 años ahí, deberíamos de ser primero los que tuviéramos la garantía de esa agua.
So if we are the first users of the Yaqui River, as the Yaqui people, anthropologists have studied that we've been using this water for at least 3,000 years, we should also have the first rights to this water.
No entendemos entonces cómo es que esta política de traspasar, de interceptar el agua que le corresponde a la tribu Yaqui antes de que llegue a nuestro territorio, ¿verdad?, implique el que nosotros tengamos que seguir soportando consumir esa agua contaminada que nos están obligando a tomar.
So how is it that today's policy makes it so that they divert this water which we've used for so long and requires us instead to drink arsenic-laden toxic water?
También decir que no podemos quedarnos callados viendo cómo el río Yaqui, que antes nos daba a nosotros la seguridad alimentaria, precisamente de la que estaba hablando la persona que me antecedió, ¿verdad?, está totalmente seco en este momento, violando todas las leyes en la materia ambiental, puesto que no hay una garantía de que ese río tenga un espejo de agua, cuando menos. Está totalmente seco.
So in addition of course that we can't stay quiet, because this water also gave life to our food security, because we have been able to grow food for ourselves, and without this water we have lost this food security, and it's violating all sorts of laws of environmental justice.
Cuando el gobierno implementó la famosa mecanización del campo, la modernización del campo, según ellos, hicieron que abriéramos áreas de cultivo compactos y obligaron a que la gente produciera un monocultivo, dejando de lado lo que tradicionalmente se había estado trabajando en esa área. Estamos hablando que 70,000 hectáreas que se regaban con el río Yaqui, rústicamente si quieres, pero que producía una variedad de alimentos muy grande, se tuvo que ser reducido con la modernización famosa a 24,000 hectáreas únicamente.
So when the government implemented So when the government implemented the premise of modernization, so-called modernization of farming, starting in the 1950s, they essentially demanded that some of these areas open up to become more focused on monocultures and to leave aside the more traditional ways of farming in which these communities have been practicing for a long time. And they actually went from having 70,000 hectares of land in this variety of basically a polycultural production system with many, many different kinds of foods being produced, was reduced to 24,000 hectares.
Lo que resulta de esto es precisamente lo que ellos estaban pretendiendo, que dependiéramos directamente, ¿verdad?, de la venta de semillas de las grandes corporaciones. Y esto se dio en todo el valle. Hoy día no hay un banco de semillas nativas que garantice el que la producción se pueda hacer independiente, ¿verdad? Y que podamos seguir nosotros consumiendo esos alimentos que nosotros pudiéramos sembrar directamente.
So this in turn makes us reliant, this modernization process makes us reliant in many ways, including on seeds. We have to purchase these seeds from multinational corporations, and we don't have a guarantee of our independence in terms of our own production of our long-standing agricultural systems and the reproduction of these systems.
Entonces la política del gobierno fue controlar las aguas por medio de presas, controlar la semilla que pudieran garantizar sembrar los alimentos y posteriormente controlar los créditos para poder sembrar esas áreas de cultivo.
So the policy of the government were essentially directed towards controlling the water, as we've talked about, controlling the seeds and the access to seeds, and as well as controlling access to credit, the kind of which enables these forms of agriculture to flourish.
Esto ha provocado que más del 70%, más del 80%, perdón, del área agrícola en el territorio Yaqui y en todo el valle del Yaqui, ¿verdad?, haya caído en cartera vencida y hoy día, a la falta de crédito, pues tengan que estar rentándose a productores particulares. A productores particulares, a inversionistas privados.
So 80% is going to is being leased out. So he's saying that because of these policies, 80% of the agricultural land of the Yaqui people, which has, as we've talked about, has been traditionally used by the Yaqui people for local food security, is now being released out often to these industrial, export-driven, other sorts of independent producers.
La intención del Estado y del gobierno en general es de que abandonemos nuestra tierra, que milenariamente hemos habitado. Nos ofrecen irnos a trabajar a las ciudades, a las maquiladoras, como mano de obra barata, ¿verdad? Porque de todos modos ya no tendríamos trabajo en nuestro territorio. Y tampoco podríamos sobrevivir porque el agua ya se las están llevando. Sin agua en esa zona semidesértica, pues no hay nada que hacer. En ese sentido, pues lograrían ellos obligarnos a emigrar de nuestra tierra, y lo que no lograron con guerras de exterminio, con deportaciones masivas, pues lo lograrían quitándonos el río.
So these policies, essentially what they want is for us to abandon our lands. They want us to abandon all hope of staying on our lands and offer us instead as cheap labor in the factories, the maquiladoras. These are factories all over the borders in Mexico, as well as cheap underpaid labor in the city. Since we lack water, the idea is without water, we won't have anything to do. We can't grow food. We can't even sustain ourselves with fresh water. So they will basically force us to immigrate. They could try to do more forced forms of immigration, but they figure it's easier simply to take away the water and take away the basis for life in this area to force us from the land.
Nosotros somos propietarios de todo ese territorio por derecho ancestral y por derecho constitucional en México. Hay un decreto que ampara nuestro territorio, que lo emitió Lázaro Cárdenas, el presidente Lázaro Cárdenas, en 1940. Con ese decreto nosotros hemos iniciado una defensa legal para evitar precisamente que se militarice la zona, argumentando que somos separatistas o terroristas, que es lo que se maneja cuando no estamos de acuerdo con las políticas de gobierno.
So we, of course, are proprietors of the land, both through our indigenous tradition, where we've been there for thousands of years, as well as legally, because Lázaro Cárdenas, who was the president of Mexico in the 1940s, pioneered a law around basically protection of people's rights to the land. So they've pursued a legal strategy to demand their rights based on the legal structures. But of course, because they are opposed by those in government, they're labeled as terrorists because they're fighting basically for their rights.
Okay. Las Cortes en México nos han dado la razón. Tenemos amparos ganados en todos los tribunales en México, y sin embargo el agua se la siguen robando. No ha habido poder humano que haya que esa obra de despojo se pare.
So the good news is that they've won in every court that they've been to. The court has ruled in their favor. So the courts say that they have the right to this land. Yet, the bad news is that the aqueduct keeps operating and they keep stealing the water nonetheless. And so there has yet to be a human force able to actually stop this process from happening.
Esa es la razón por la que tuvimos que salir de nuestro territorio, de nuestra nación, de nuestro México, para venir a denunciar lo que está sucediendo allá. Estuvimos en Washington, en la Comisión Interamericana de Derechos Humanos, hemos estado en Nueva York, en los foros permanentes en materia de derechos humanos y pueblos indígenas, ¿verdad? Y hoy estamos aquí buscando la solidaridad, buscando el apoyo que como seres humanos y como seres conscientes y civilizados tenemos para poder vivir en este planeta Tierra. Si nosotros como pueblos, como humanos, como seres humanos, no nos damos la mano, este planeta no tiene un futuro. Gracias.
Yes. So Mario was saying that's why they are traveling now outside of the country, leaving their homeland in order to talk about these issues with people. They went to D.C., Washington, D.C., to meet with human rights organizations. They went to New York and met at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Rights. And they are coming here looking for solidarity from other people, civilized people, conscious people, people who care, looking for that solidarity, because really what he's saying is that if we as people can't come together and support each other in these struggles, then there is no future for the planet. So thank you. So now, Miguel, I don't have to translate Miguel.
Well, I'm sorry. Yes.
So all the
So what I was going to do was I was going to talk about Mexico. That is very interesting, the situation, the political situation, and it has a lot to do with land grabbing. After 1994, after the NAFTA was passed, we have a revolution in 1910, and after the revolution, in order to redistribute the land among indigenous communities and respect their rights to the land, the government created a figure that is called ejido. I don't know if you have heard about ejido. I think Mexico is the only country that has this figure, and actually the land in Mexico, the agricultural land, over 50% of the agricultural land in Mexico still remains in the hands of community. It's the only country in the world. No Russia, no Cuba, no China. It's Mexico. At the same time, we haven't more vulnerable for the situation with the NAFTA. This fair trade agreement, this free trade agreement, and what is going to happen if they implement the TPP is going to be terrible for our communities. And at the same time, we see that since 1994, we saw the Zapatista rising in Chiapas. They create their own communities, that are autonomous. We have in Brazil, we have the landless movement that are millions of people, but they still have some relation with the government. I have heard that they get some money for education, but in Mexico, the Zapatistas, they don't have any relationship with the government. They don't accept any support from the government, and they are in constant harassment by the military, but they resist, and they own their land, and they have created their own public education. So this is just one example of many things that are going on in Mexico. And now that the situation is very explosive in many places in Mexico, we also have seen different communities organizing and creating their own community, their own community police to defend from groups of drug dealers and the mafias that are popping up in different states. And what we have seen is that these people that have been getting weapons to defend themselves from these groups are not just defending themselves physically, but they are also defending the resources. Because in many of these cases, the mafia went from dealing with drugs to start clear-cutting the forest and also selling the wood and also stealing all the resources and selling them in the black market. So these people, we have the case of Cherán in Michoacán, where over 0.5% of the trees is a mountain it's a beautiful place in the highlands with a lot of trees, a lot of pines, and the mafia came with weapons and they start clear cutting all the trees. They deforest over 50% of this area, and the community organized. They create barricades in the roads. A lot of people got killed, but they kick out all the mafia. And the old ladies, they came and they say, we cannot allow them to kill the forest, because if they kill the forest, they're going to kill us, because we get our food, our wood, our medicine from the forest. So people is organizing everywhere, and they are fighting back. And it's something that many people here don't know, because we don't see it in mainstream media. We can hear a lot of things that are going on in Ukraine, in Syria, where the U.S. have some geopolitical interest. But in Mexico, no, because the government in Mexico is sold out of the U.S., So it's very important. It's why I invite el compañero Mario Luna to come and talk about it. And I don't want to take more time because we are a little behind. I would prefer, if you have questions to Mario Luna, to ask maybe 3 questions, and I would prefer that, or to Elizabeth Fraser. Elizabeth Fraser? Yes. Okay. So.
Does No one has any questions? Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, go for it.
My question is to Elizabeth. I'm from Ghana, and we have this issue of land grabbing so much now because they come to Ghana from all over the world and they tell us that they build hospitals, they build schools for the community, and they grab, expanse of land. And they also tell the farmers that the crop that we grow is what you should grow. We'll buy the crops from you and we export to wherever they want to export it to. So now with your institution, how do we collaborate with you? Because that has been the issue in Ghana. The government is supporting these big corporations because they get tax from them, they derive so many other benefits from them, and so the government of Ghana is behind them, and so the people don't have a say, they can't defend themselves. So we need external force to defend the people and to defend our land. So how do we collaborate with you? How do we work with you?
Excuse me, the question is for Elizabeth.
Yeah.
For Elizabeth. Okay,
Yeah.
Elizabeth, this is your question. This question for you.
Sure. I think the short answer is that I'd love to talk to you when the panel is over, and we can exchange information and talk about the possibility of future collaborations. To add a bit more color to that, generally the way that the Institute has worked with communities is through examples like this, where they come and seek our help as an external force to be able to support efforts going on the ground. We're getting requests like this from all around the world, and the more we engage in these issues, the more issues we uncover are taking place in other regions. So this is exactly the kind of situation that we exist to work with, and the exact kind of populations that we strive to work in solidarity with. So I would love to touch base after the panel and talk about that more.
I have another question. I had two things to say. One thing is thank you very much for your presentation. The second thing is that I was hoping to hear that obviously your peoples took care of the land for thousands and thousands of years and didn't destroy the land. And the industry and the government is coming in and destroying the land. Of course, that's happening all over the world. That's just one argument I'm sure you're using. The second thing in relation to this question, it would seem like that the focus in the United States, many of these companies are based here in the United States or in the Western countries, sort of like the South African apartheid movement, where there was such an international force to put pressure on governments to stop supporting, for example, the embargoes of the South African shipping and stuff. That would be what needed to be organized here, is that in order to make an effect on the world, we need to organize here in the United States. But you could comment on that.
I have something that I want to add. You know, en México tenemos ahora algo que se llama la acción colectiva. In Mexico, we are using now the class action lawsuit. It's a new thing that came with the NAFTA and all this stuff. Y Adelita San Vicente y la gente de Sin Maíz No Hay País tienen una acción de clase contra Monsanto y el gobierno. ¿Por qué no hacer una acción de clase contra la Pepsi, contra la Coca? Porque saben ustedes que el agua viene de ahí y que ellos se le están robando y ellos les tienen que pagar. So what I am asking him, in Mexico, as we have this demand against the government and Monsanto because they want to grow GMO corn, I am wondering, I am personally asking him, why not to raise a class action lawsuit against these companies that are based there, Pepsi and Heineken and Coca-Cola, and because they are making profit from their water, because there is no a way to find where the water is coming from, but from their resources. So I don't know, it's just one idea, but how they can support you from here, your struggle in Sonora. ¿Cómo pueden apoyar tu lucha en Sonora?
Sí, es importante decirles que a raíz de que están controlando ellos totalmente el agua del río Yaqui, ya hay más de 5,000 hectáreas que antes eran altamente productivas en agrícola, que están totalmente ensalitrados.
Dice que a raíz de, because since they are exploiting the water, using the water, there are more than 5,000 hectares, like 15,000 acres, that are no good for agriculture anymore.
La calidad del agua que estamos consumiendo es totalmente mala. Ya COFEPRIS, que es la institución del gobierno que mide la calidad de los productos, ya decretó que el agua está mala, la que estamos consumiendo diario, ¿verdad? Pero dice, ustedes tienen la opción de tomarla o no tomarla.
That's interesting because it says that the water that they are consuming is highly polluted, and the institution that regulates the water quality, that is COFEPRIS in Mexico, has acknowledged that it's very bad, this water, but the government says that is their choice to drink it or no. You know?
La necesidad que tenemos de que esto se dé a conocer, yo creo que es la forma en la que ustedes pueden apoyarnos en compartir esta información, ¿verdad? Y saber, pues, que como seres humanos entendemos la necesidad de agua que tienen otros seres humanos. Sin embargo, nosotros también defendemos nuestro derecho a existir, y es por eso que estamos aquí con ustedes, para que podamos tener también la solidaridad y el apoyo en la medida en que cada uno de ustedes lo pueda hacer.
He says that he is appealing to your own need to have good water and resources, because they also need the same, and that. And if you share this information within your networks and among people that you know, that is going to be helpful. But also, it will be helpful if you can visit the Yaqui community as international observers. Pero sería bueno que vinieran como observadores internacionales a visitarlos ustedes, allá a la comunidad. And I think that this would be very helpful, because it's what happened, for example, in Chiapas with the Zapatistas. People went there and it become a big issue, you know, but if no one visits them from other countries, and if you are a foreigner in Mexico, it's not dangerous because you have your passport, it's your shell. You know, if you are Mexican, you can get killed or whatever, but if you are from France or from the US, no one is going to mess with you because you have your shell, that is your passport. They don't want an international conflict.
So Miguel, you have a relationship with Andro Behar of As You Sow. And as you know, in this country, we have tremendous shareholder activism that we can undertake on behalf of Pepsi, Heineken, Coca-Cola. And some of the members of As You Sow, located here in San Francisco, are among the very best and most successful shareholder activists in the world. And so I suggest that this local Bay Area group work with As You Sow to work with our honored guest here to ensure that such a travesty does not sustain, by having the shareholders of those companies tell the management that this is not only not okay, but should stop right away.
Gracias. Sí, es interesante la observación que hacen, porque eso ayudaría bastante a que la justificación económica que tiene el gobierno para implementar esa obra, pues es esa precisamente. Ellos dicen que no han podido cerrar el acueducto porque fue mucho dinero lo que se invirtió.
So the government says that they cannot close that ¿cómo se dice aqueduct? That aqueduct, because they invest a lot of money, but actually they invest the money from Mexican people taxes to build an infrastructure that was going to benefit corporations. Ellos hicieron eso con el dinero de los impuestos de los mexicanos para una corporación.
Así es.
Now what I am proposing him or what I would propose you is total with Mario. We don't have more time for questions. We have to start the next plenary. But what I would propose you, if you are interested in this, maybe you can create a small group, a committee in solidarity with the people, the Yaqui people. So if you are interested, why you don't talk after these presentations with Mario? You can get his contact. And if you need translation, I can help, or someone else who speaks Spanish and English, maybe Antonio. And if you're interested, it would be really, really helpful to have a committee in solidarity with the Yaqui people. Thank you so much.
Thank you.